My name is Abigail Hakas. I'm a third-year student at Chatham University, and I'm a student journalist. Over the summer, I worked as an editorial intern for the Pittsburgh Jewish Chronicle, so I worked on stories for them, and I was on the rotating team of writers who covered the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting. I would be assigned a day at the trial to cover, so I would be the writer for the Pittsburgh Jewish Chronicle and the Pittsburgh Union-Progress that day, and I would cover from 9 a.m. to about 5 p.m. the entire day's testimony, and I would write a story about that. And then I also did other stories, just community news in the Jewish community, around Pittsburgh, anything related to that I'd also do. And luckily we were on a rotating team, so I usually only covered one day a week. There were two spaces journalists could go. They could either be in one of the limited spaces in the actual courtroom itself, where electronics aren't allowed, or they could go to the media room where you could take a laptop. So I'd usually go to the media room, and I would use my laptop to take notes and write the story while I was there. I think the thing that shocked me the most was seeing how much journalists were willing to help each other in the courtroom. In the courthouse, because we were all unable to record and we had to take notes by hand, if someone missed something, they'd just speak up and say, did anyone get that? What did they say? And the media room, anyone in it would just give the answer. That surprised me a lot because I've never been in a collaborative space like that across publications. You never knew what the day would look like when you were going in, and that was part of what made it so challenging. If I missed 5 minutes, I don't know I could write a full story. It got to a point where if I had a week where I wasn't assigned a day at the trial, I felt like I wasn't doing my job well because it was such a big part of my work over the summer, and it was really intense and grueling. You'd spend like 8 or 9 hours in the courthouse hearing some of the worst things you could ever hear, and then you go home and have to recount all of that for people who weren't in the room. I mean, it was hard even just to sleep the night before because I was thinking about all of the things that I would end up hearing and all of the things that I would end up having to write. I hope I never have to cover anything like this again. It was an important story, but it was taxing, it was difficult. I would speak to journalists who went into the courtroom and they described to me what it was like being near the shooter and seeing him completely remorseless, completely detached from what was happening. It occupies every moment of your life when you're working on a story like this, and it's hard to get it out of your mind when you're just trying to relax or you're out with friends. It's hard to not think about some of the things you've heard, and it's hard to cover that. But I was on a very good team of journalists, and I had a lot of support from my editors and from everyone from the Union-Progress, everyone from the Jewish Chronicle. I really could not have done it on my own. The work the Chronicle does speaks to how important it is to have community newspapers, especially those catered to specific minority groups. One of the things we talked about in our coverage was how are we going to do trauma-informed coverage, because survivors of the shooting, families of those who were killed, they read the Chronicle. How do we write it in a way that is sensitive to them? How do we avoid just opening old wounds? So things like, I never wrote the shooter's name. That was something that we talked about, was how much can we limit saying his name, because it gives him power, and also we had been told that it was hurtful to read the name and it was damaging to read the name. And I think the work that Jewish Chronicle does is so important because these larger outlets don't necessarily have the same freedom to consider the individual reader. And the Jewish Chronicle is one of a kind in Pittsburgh. And it was really important to them that this was covered in a sensitive way. And so it became really important to me. And I think that's why the Chronicle's work is so amazing in Pittsburgh, because there's no other outlet that's doing that. This trial was a part of a healing process for survivors and their families and the families of the victims. And I'm just happy that it's over for them. And I'm glad that they're finally able to put this part of the story to a close.